9 key concepts. You will be tested on these 9 concepts. You obviously will need to be able to list the 9, but then explain them as well. All right, that's your objective today, is to be able to explain the 9 key concepts of the Declaration of Independence. If you remember, there's a lot of debate leading up to this. We've seen that in the movie, in the John Adams movie. Okay? And when they finally did vote, out of 13 colonies, how many voted yes for independence? 12. What happened to New York? They abstained. Why?
Well, they said they wanted to give Pennsylvania first.
Yeah, which they got. Pennsylvania voted in favor. Why did New York abstain? Based on what we've seen in the movie.
Wait, they didn't want to get targeted by the British. Well, they didn't want to get targeted as much as the other colonies because they were right on the border of Canada where all the British were at.
The British were in New York City.
Oh, so they were right there.
They were already there. But, yes, that is the main reason why they abstained. But publicly, they stated what? What did the big guy say?
All 13.
No. The New York delegate, kind of robust guy, been eating well.
Oh, that they would be destroyed.
Yes, but what is the reason he abstained? He did not cast a yes or no vote, is what abstention means. Do the delegates get to make decisions on their own?
Oh, no.
No. Now, does that spur you on what the conversation was? Anya? Huh? Do you remember yesterday?
That he had not received orders from New York by that point.
Yes, New York delegates had not yet received instructions from the New York legislators on what to do. So he abstained. These guys are not acting on their own. All right. The Declaration can be broken down into 3 broader categories. The first category is how it's structured. There's 7 components, and then the closing. 3 broad categories that these 9 concepts fit into. So, we're looking at the universal, we're looking at the big picture of the document. It is split up into 3 categories. So what does this have to do with government? Almost nothing. We're actually taking a literary approach to this document. Other than our founding fathers were very literate, and they established this document in a very purposeful, classical writing style. But we're going to take a look at it from a literary perspective. So the structure. It starts with the essence and principles with which the U.S. was founded. These principles are split between the preamble, which is the opening, and the closing, which is called the oath statements. And in the middle, so let me back up, explain to you what a preamble is. A preamble is the explanation of why this document is being written. And the oath statements, the closing, is the oaths they make between each other and to God. Between those 2 sections, you have about 400 words of the document. The preamble is the reason for them writing this document, and the oath statements are their declaration of oaths to each other and to God. The middle section is the list of abuses that they're accusing King George of committing. And this particular list encompasses about 25 major abuses over a 10-year period. Now, you should be asking the question, at least to yourself, if not to me, 25 abuses based on what?
English law.
There you go. Those Liberty documents. That's what the king is accused of violating. And making up of the abuse section, the middle section, is about 1,000 words. So most of the writing is outlining the abuses of the king. Document's only about 1,400 words, not very much. Looks like a lot on that big sheet of paper, but it really isn't. So let's take a look at the preamble. You do not need to write this down. It's too much. There was a time when you were required to memorize the preamble, ladies and gentlemen, word for word. We don't do that anymore. Not really sure why. Yes, Cody? You had to when? In 8th grade? Okay. So there's still some teachers doing it then. Say again? Abel did it at Wilder? Good. So it starts out as a unanimous declaration of the 13 United States, something you do need to take a look at here that's important to see. Notice that right there. Is that a small s or a capital S?
Capital.
That's a capital S. Capitalization in this document means a lot. It is not improper English they're using. We're going to talk about the importance of capital S in states very soon here.
That's because they weren't one nation yet. They're just united.
United is not capitalized for a reason. States are. States, plural. Capital S indicates nation state. These are 13 countries. States is being used not in small states that we think of, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. Prior to the Civil War, we were all individual countries. We were called republics. In fact, our Idaho Constitution says we are a republic in this state, though we don't function like one anymore. We can get into how the Civil War changed that. We will get into how the Civil War changed that. But at this time, up through the Civil War, we were independent nation states, not little states. So when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people, remember, they are explaining why they're writing this document. It becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature, capitalized, and of nature's God, capitalized, entitle them a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, requires them that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Jefferson writes here, he invokes a few principles in here. One is, of course, is of nature and of nature's God. We've talked about natural law, have we not? Okay. This comes right out of natural law theory. Okay. They can look in nature and see there is a certain order in things. And then, of course, of nature's God is who we would refer to as Yahweh, or capital G, God, the Judeo-Christian God. He invokes natural rights here, natural law. Okay, and they're saying if a people is going to separate, then they need to explain to the world why. So that is our preamble. It is the explanation It's be like when I write your objectives on the wall. What are we going to learn today? Here's what it is. It's the preamble of the lesson. This is the preamble of the declaration, why we are writing this. So we're going to take a look at the oath statement. Do not need to write this, but do understand some of these concepts. So you may need to write something, especially maybe the ones I've underlined for you there. But the oath statement, I don't think you need to unless you want to memorize it. But this is their oath statement. They have 2 oaths placed in here. Notice it's in hierarchy order. And for the support of this declaration, this is at the end of the declaration, by the way, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. Who is divine providence? God. Notice how they will use different names, just like the Hebrews do. The Hebrews have, I think, if I ain't mistaken, 13 different names for God, depending on what function he serves. Jehovah Jireh is my provider. Elohim is God, plural, referring to the God of the Holy Spirit in Christ. I can't think of all the names right now. I probably should, but there are multiple names for Yahweh that is used in the way in which he is serving the Hebrew people. Much similar to how our founding fathers would use different names. So that's the first oath. The second is we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Why? If you're going to pledge yourself to somebody, why would you choose these 3 things as collateral, if you will, as a promise?
Because those are the most important things to them during that time.
Perfect, Brett. Exactly. Their lives, of course, is the most important. That's their first natural right. It's the right to life. The second, of course, is their guarantee all of their money for this cause. Money is a big deal to human beings. We don't get up in the morning and work every day for free. Even if we liked the job, we would find ourselves doing other things at some point if we weren't getting paid. In fact, like the job all you want, try surviving without a Benjamin in your pocket. You're not going to make your mortgage or your rent, and you're not going to eat very well, no matter how much you like your job. So money is a big deal in human society. What about sacred honor? Why not just honor? What's the deal with sacred honor?
Because they believe it's something that should not be harmed or touched, yet they're offering it up.
Okay, I understand why you're saying what you're saying. I don't know that I would necessarily go with that. I think it's deeper than that. I think you're on the right track, though. Don't ride on Brett's coattails, ladies and gentlemen. Why is the third component, the third piece of collateral to their name, are they attaching this sacred honor to? Isn't your word worth anything in here? Haley, when you tell somebody you're going to do something, does your word mean anything? Do you hold any value to your word? Why? Say again. You're a reliable person, okay. What if all of a sudden you become not reliable? What would that indicate? Say again, Axel, help her out. Not honoring yourself, okay. Anya, you had to give an oath this summer.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. What'd that mean to you?
That you're pretty much doing like volunteering yourself to go in danger, and that you're pledging yourself. You're not just being like, yeah, I'll do that, because like once you say you do it, then you're like in, and you can't really back out because you've made a commitment.
You've made a commitment, that's right. And who have you made a commitment to when you gave your oath this summer?
The government.
The government? Okay, who else? Huh? Think about it now. It's not explicit, but you will realize this if you ever get shipped to combat.
The people of the United States.
People of the United States, okay? The citizens, there's something even more, at the end of the day, why do soldiers fight?
To protect their family and their country.
Okay? Even closer than that. Nope. That's what, on the surface, that's what it is. But at the end of the day, soldiers who have fought together in real combat,
To protect their battle buddies.
there you go. You're protecting your friends. And in the military, they're called battle buddies. You never, ever, what do you never do with a battle buddy?
Put them in harm's way.
Put them in harm's way or leave them. You die together. You live together. You crawl in the mud together. You don't leave them. That is the most sacred honor a soldier has, is to each other. Family, country, all of that is that's superficial. That's what we use to recruit you. But in real life, every soldier who's ever served and had been shot at, seen their friends die, they will all say they fought for one another.
Because your family's not there with you.
That's right, exactly. It's not your country's got your back. In fact, there's a good chance your country don't have your back. And it's not your family because they're not there. At the end of the day, it's up to you and your buddy. It's up to you and your squad. That's why you sleep together, you train together. If you get smoked together, if you don't know what that means on your nose. You get push-ups and smoking means you're just wore out from them working you over. One person in the group messes up, you all pay for it. Because you have to operate as a team. You either survive together or you die together. It's that kind of thing. It's so strong for vets that, for example, those on U.S. Arizona in Pearl Harbor, when they die, they choose to be cremated. Many of them choose to be cremated and then interned on the ship with their mates that did not get out of that ship when it sank. Yes. Yeah, there's not a whole lot they can do with it. It's eventually going to collapse. Say again? No. No. So this idea of honor, in fact, honor is such an important thing to this, to society, to men at this time period, that if you insulted one of them, you're likely to be sent out to a duel. Okay, 20 paces, you pull pistols and shoot. Trust me, people had a lot thicker skin back then. If you were willing to put your mouth up on a firing line, then you had something worth going down for. Okay, but honor is a big deal. You notice how John Adams in the movie insulted Dickerson about his religion. Remember that? Okay, that was an honor thing. That was not a good thing to have done publicly like that. So the highest three things that our founding could offer each other was their life, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. I may ask you that. Why did they choose to offer up their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor? Especially if it's an essay test that you guys do. It is very likely I'm going to ask you to explain that. I might even ask you to apply it to your life today. What would you do? What is so important to you that you would offer your life, your fortune, and your sacred honor? The second category is the component parts. Breaks down into 7. 7 parts of the preamble. In the preamble, I guess we could call it that way. Do not do the quote, but the first part is reason. Now, you might have to be able to tell me the reason in your own words. You're going to have to know why the Declaration was written. So we have already read the reason. They recognize if A group of people is going to dissolve their relationship with their government. They need to tell the world why. Because this is about as much of a treasonous, catastrophic thing to have done in society is to separate from your government. You better have a good justification. And here's another reason. Kings all over the world don't like rebels. And so in order for these guys to show the world we are not rebels, we have justification for doing this. And they're telling the world, particularly King Louis, who they want support from, that we are not rebels, we are not traitors. So the first part is the reason. The second part is the self-evident truths. So they're not just justifying it out of a whim. They're saying there are certain self-evident truths, natural rights given to us by God that's been violated. And of course, among those, notice in the writing they say among these, and they list the top three. But that tells us they recognize there are more. So the first component in the preamble is the reasoning for the declaration. Second is the self-evident truths they list. So why are they self-evident? Do you remember what Benjamin Franklin talked about in that little meeting? They exist whether we recognize them or not. They exist in nature. They exist whether we exist or not. Another way to say self-evident truths is transcendent truth. Transcendent meaning they are the same today, yesterday, and tomorrow in every circumstance, in every situation, in every age. They never change. These rights never, ever change. Transcendent through time. Now that I make a distinction here because we live in a society now where it is almost impossible to get away with stating there is a transcendent truth, or another way to say an absolute truth. Everything is relative today. It all depends. If somebody wants to have 5 wives, they can have 5 wives. Who am I to say? Next thing you know, now they're making cases for other behavior, such as pedophilia being legalized, such as animals being legalized. And I'm not kidding you. That is on the docket now. Yes. Yes, they are. They're trying to incorporate that into that community in order to say, look, we're no different. This is our choice. This is how we identify. But our founding fathers believed there is a transcendent truth, there is absolute truth, and there is an absolute truth giver. The third component is the purpose of government. Remember this from our first lesson in this class. There's a reason why we started with that lesson. The purpose of government, Jefferson says, is to secure the people's inalienable rights. Now, you don't have to do the quote. I paraphrased it for you with the letter A there. You will want that. To secure these rights, government is instituted among men. So in other words, men create government and they derive their authority from the consent of the governed. To secure these rights, to keep them, to protect them. Governments are established by the citizens, by the people. And they get their authority to govern by those who establish them. So we have these inalienable rights. Government's job is to protect these rights. Did the king protect these rights? They're going to tell us. Now they go into the justification. The justification for changing or abolishing the government. So they're not saying you have to completely wipe out your government system and start over. You could change it. We've changed ours 27 times. Our federal government, I should say. I don't remember how many times we've changed the state government. Whenever any form of government, not just our government, any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, what are these ends? The protection of natural rights. It is the right, capital R, which is referencing natural right. Anytime you see in our Declaration of our Founding Fathers' writings and they use capital R rights, that is referring to natural rights, God-given rights. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, to change or get rid of it, and to create new government or institute new government, laying its foundation on which principles and organizing its powers in such form that to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. It's not up to the government to fix itself. It's up to the people. So they've established the principles of which government is derived, is created, what their duty is. Now, when they violate that duty, they've told us what people are obligated to do. Change it, fix it, or change it. So they're going from universal principles, and they're getting narrower to the particulars of their time, what they need to do right now. This applies to everyone, and therefore, this is our situation, and this is what we're going to do. Does that make sense? Think of a funnel. Funnel up on top, everything goes in, right? But it all gets necked down into a neck, and everything comes down very particular, in a particular order and fashion. Number 5 is the list of grievances. So they've established when government is destructive to natural rights, the people can change or fix it, can alter or abolish the government. So, what did the king do? Well, they list them. Remember, we're going from universal to particular right now. And they list over 25 abuses over a 10-year period as evidence that the king has been destructive to the purpose of government. In the next slide, we're going to go through those. You might want to write them down so at least if you do an essay, you have... yeah, go ahead, because I haven't decided. We may even have you do a project on this. Or it might be on the test, hint, hint. You may have to attach the liberty documents that that the kings violated. I'll show you on the next slide what I'm talking about. Remember, I told you we're never going to get away from the liberty documents. We're just adding a 5th one now, the Declaration. Also, remember at the start of this class I said our Founding Fathers did not create something new. They were only reestablishing, reconfirming what was already there. All right, 1, unfair taxation. So if I have you match the liberty documents to the abuses, it'd be very similar to what you've seen in 2 columns. You have a list of the abuses, you have a list of the documents, and you will write the letter corresponding to the document. You should know right away by looking at these that some of these will incorporate more than one document, correct? Yep. Unfair taxation. What's the first document should come to mind? Thank you. There you go. First one, unfair taxation is the 1100 Charter of Liberties. And that is because William II was doing what? There you go, overtaxation. So, and I think we break them down into 12 categories. I don't give you all 25. Myself and I did some reading on this, kind of categorize all of these abuses into like 12 categories. So you're not going to have, now I do think you ought to read the Declaration. We probably should. I can't believe I'm going to say we're not going to read it. At some point we will have to read it in an assignment coming up. But what principles are they violating with number 4, making arbitrary laws himself?
That's in the Petition of Rights.
Okay, that's one.
And the English Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights, yes. English Bill of Rights,
And Latin Rights.
yes. Those 3. How about number 5? Creating new government departments with officials that harass the people. What's that, Dylan? Okay. Yeah, you should be, where we're going with some of this, you should be coming to mind, things should be coming to mind that you should be equating to today. Dylan brings up TSA. Yes, that is a government department. Now, why is that a problem? Government department who has the force of law behind them. What's the deal with government, what we call alphabet soup agencies? That's what they're called today. Government agencies. What's the problem there? They got the authority to detain you. Okay, we're still back on TSA. Okay, yes, but bigger picture than that. Government agencies, what is one of the first things they do? Any agency. And this could be a state agency, federal agency, doesn't matter. Keep up order and law. How do they do that? By what mechanism? Justice system. Okay, how do they get to the justice system? Interrogation? Well, maybe, but why would they interrogate? What has led up to that point of them coming up to question you?
In order to secure our safety and liberty, we must sacrifice them.
Yes, every time a law is made, that's what's happening. You're giving away more freedom, more liberty when you have more laws made, especially in the guise of safety. They make policy and rules that has the force of law. For example, most of what schools do is found under what's called the Idaho Administrative Procedure Code, or ADAPA is the initial. It's the acronym, ADAPA codes. Most of what we have to do, including the state standards that we have to teach to, is found in the ADAPA rules. Now think about this. Who is supposed to make the laws?
People.
Representatives, right? Now, I use that term broadly because we haven't taught, if it's the federal government, it's the Congress, right? If it's Idaho, then we're talking about the state legislators. The point is representatives. How are representatives chosen? By the people. Laws are to be made through representative government. Agencies or government departments do not have that. You have no representation in these departments. And they can do pretty much whatever they want, and they do whatever they want. That was egregious to our founding fathers. Yet we tolerate hundreds and hundreds of these departments today. Hundreds of them. Yes. I think we will after I get done with this section. Yeah, it's a major problem. Oh, here we go. Number 7, protecting his own officials that were murderers. What does that violate? First document. Yes, the king and his men are not above the law. 1100 Charter of Liberties. What I would do, sometime on your own time, if we have time today, I might even let you do it here. Go back and start writing on these 12 points, the documents that they violate. That's what I would do. Attempting to establish military rule. What particular provision does that violate?
Petitioner rights no English bill right then and there.
What particular provision in those, though?
The no soldier shall be quartered without permission.
That's right. Violation against the quartering of troops during peacetime. Now they're arguing, the British, keep in mind, will argue that it's not peacetime. We have rebels running around, the colony's in a state of rebellion. That's a key term for the British, because that, in their mind, and legally so, institutes or sets aside that provision. Because the provision is no quartering of troops during peacetime. When they declare a region in rebellion, it's no longer peacetime. Now, of course, the colonists would argue we're not in rebellion, we're not at war, we don't want war, even though they're fighting for a year since Lexington and Concord, they still don't want war. They don't want it. British says, yeah, you're in war anyway. Now remember these principles, because when we start looking at, well, history, we're definitely going to dive into it, but we will get to a point where we will discuss some of the arguments of succession that led to the War of the Northern Aggression. And then today's discussion, there are people calling for separation of the Union. Breaking off. California has talked about breaking off. I don't think they'll ever do it. And then so they've talked about breaking up into 3 states. Idaho's talked about breaking up into 2 states. This is back in the 80s. There's little talk about Eastern Washington and Oregon joining Idaho. And then there are those who are predicting in 100 years the United States will break up into independent republics of some sort. We'll discuss that probably at some point based on the principles of the Declaration, whether we can do that, whether the people can do that or not. The last 2, fostering domestic uprising in the colonies. One of the things the British liked doing was to get the Indians to attack the colonists on the backside of the Appalachians, force them out of the frontier. They also tried to pit one another against each other. So you have those who haves and those who have nots. You see that in the debate in the movie, where some people are holding out, and they're called Tories, because if they can hold out, they end up benefiting if the British wins. They're supporters of the British. And you got others who are not. Those who are called patriots. So they didn't get along. And if you ever watch the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson, made probably in the 90s, late 90s, very well done in showing period dress and the way they fought. There was a guy that was called the Grey Ghost by the British down in South Carolina, who kind of had some similar activities that Mel Gibson's character did. But you'll see how his own neighbors turned against him. That happened. And of course, disallowing or not hearing any appeals for justice. That's a violation of the right for a redress of grievances. The people have the right to approach the throne to have their cases heard face to face. The closing statements, we have a declaration in it and the rights of United Sovereign States. Notice it's capital S again. This is the structure of the closing. All right, because the king has not fulfilled his promise in securing the people's rights, again, big R rights, they have chosen to abolish the government. And this is what you're going to see in their language here. So they make the case, they give the reason for the declaration, they point out the reason for government, they point out the king has violated his sovereign duty to protect the people, and they do so by outlining these abuses. And because of that, they are going to separate. They have justified their separation now. They don't just justify it, they appeal to the Supreme Judge of the world. Supreme Judge, both is capitalized, you will see when I pull it up here. Who is the Supreme Judge of the world? Who are they referencing to? That's right. God again, another name for him. So they appealed to the Supreme Judge of the world for the correctness of their actions. That's the first authority that they appealed to. The declaration is that the states should and are free, independent states. So let's take a look here at the actual verbiage. We therefore, the representatives of the United States, notice you don't see it very well up there, unfortunately, but I can see it right there. States, capital S, of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, due in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare. Here's the declaration. These united colonies are, and of right, capital R, which indicates what? Natural right, ought to be free and independent states. That they are absolved from all connections between them and the state of Great Britain. Now that's a key point right there. Notice this state is capitalized as well. The state of Great Britain is a country, correct? Capital S here. State, country. Capital S, country. So they're placing themselves at the same level as all 13 of them, by the way, not one unit. At the same level as Great Britain. They are free and independent states. They have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may have a right to do. They are declaring 13 independent countries. I keep hammering this because this plays a role, major role in the South, in their understanding of the nature of their independentness. And it plays a role in today's arguments of states' rights. All right, 7, the pledges. Now we're coming up to the end. Last slide. We are going to make it today. Sweet. The 7 components, the pledges. They make 2 pledges, one to God and one to each other. Pretty cut and dry here. There's not much discussion about it. for the support of this declaration with the firm alliance or reliance on the protection of divine providence. Who or what is divine providence? You're going to want, if I ask you to tell me to cite the pledge to each other, you might want to be able to do that. But I color-coded it here so you can see the separation in one sentence. But who is divine providence, or what is divine providence? Who are they referring to? God. Again. For a bunch of deists, they sure have this notion to evoke God's name a lot of times. Which, by the way, most history teachers, most historians will tell you a lot of our founding fathers were deist or atheist. Not true. Read their writings and see how much they believed in a Judeo-Christian concept of God. Even Jefferson, who is probably the most critical of Christianity according to historians, even in his last will and testament, evoked Christ's name as his Lord and Savior. Unless you are a Christian, you don't do that. Atheists and deists most certainly would not. So maybe in his younger years, he was inclined to maybe to be more towards the deist end or atheist end, maybe. There is some argument that I think when you read his early writings, you might be able to see that. But in his older years, I don't believe that at all, reading his writings. And I have 2 books on nothing but his letters to other people that he wrote. And so that's one unique thing about Jefferson, is he created this copy machine. So as he wrote with his pen, he had it hooked up. I've seen pictures of it, that there's another pen on the other side writing the same letter. So he made a copy of everything he wrote. And that's one reason why we have so many of his letters now, is he kept them in his own library. So I have 2 volumes of his writings, and I've read lots of them. I do not believe, at least at the time of his death, that he was a deist or an atheist. I think he was really big into science, so he had a real hard time rectifying the supernatural with scientific evidence. I think he had a tough time doing that. But in his last will and testament, he made a very clear declaration of where his faith was. So I just know atheists would not do that. Deists, there's no reason for a deist to do that. So a deist, and I'm being very simplistic here, please understand that up front. A deist is someone who recognizes there is a first mover, a first causer. Like perhaps there is a God that put everything into motion, but once things got into motion, then he stepped back and he has no influence in the world, no personal relationship with mankind. Very much like what Aristotle believed in. He believed there was a higher power that put everything into creation, that created everything, but after that, he stepped away and said, I don't think he's involved in our lives, though. And I'm being very simplistic. Please understand that. It's much more complicated than that. Maybe one day we'll teach world religions here. It's an interesting thing. And I have a wall chart over here of how the different world religions came out of other schools of thought, and then how some of them have died away, like Greek mythology. We call it Greek mythology, but in fact it's Greek religion. The reason we call it mythology is nobody in their right mind would believe in Zeus, but they sure did, and they acted in accordance to it. So, that is the overview of the Declaration. We'll spend the next couple of days watching some short video on the Declaration as we tear it apart. Okay? There'll be assignments to go with each short video. But that is the overview. It is all testable. Okay? You need to understand the Declaration because it will be constantly coming back, including in today's debates.